In Loving Memory by Jane Grimshaw. I stared at the clean, white paper in front of me that smelt as crisp as it looked. The blank sheet looked back at me as if eager to be filled with many descriptive words that would eventually become my story. I'd spent the first part of the morning working with figures that didn't seem to add up somehow, whichever way I looked at them. Now it was certainly time for a change, and writing, of course, was what I loved best of all. I glanced up for a few seconds before I began and stared round the room. A loud chattering soon penetrated my eardrums from all angles, some willing me to join in or participate in idle gossip. I wasn't interested. They were wasting their time. They may as well have been a million miles away. The chattering soon turned to distant mumblings as I put pen to paper and drifted into my own world. I wrote the title, Missing You. Not much of a title really, but it was a starting point. I scribbled down the words slowly at first, and then quickened up my pace as the pictures of my sick father unfolded in front of me. He had spent a long time in hospital, and it had taken some time to establish the fact that all his symptoms were down to kidney failure. I had spent many hours sitting by his bedside in the hospital, and had no trouble describing the regimented beds, with their white cotton sheets and pale blue blankets, each with their own matching curtains that hung limply by the sides. As I continued to churn out my words, I could almost taste the bittersweet flavour of the grapes that had reluctantly entered my mouth, and feel that anguish of that crying lady with the crippling, clattering horseshoes that echoed around the room. Waves, scents from cut flowers would waft in front of me, and the smell of disinfectant lingered all around me like a bad smell, even long after I'd left the building. My father, in his pressed blue pyjamas, always managed to smile and keep cheerful, despite his pale and drawn appearance, and my mother's face spoke many words of concern, even though she tried to conceal them. My sister Rachel and I even managed to sit next to each other without the usual provocation. Into my thoughts and fears, a grey mark on the wall above the bed had strangely been the focus of much of my attention, and there were days when it really irritated me to the point of wanting to climb up and paint over it. Finding the right words to express the quietness around the house without his infectious laughter, the empty place at the table, and the unused shoes by the door was probably the hardest part of the story, but I did my best to emphasise it on paper. Suddenly, a tear rolled down my cheek and landed on the paper below. I ran my hand across the desk. It was smooth, clean and free from graffiti. I looked down to see my paper was empty, and realised that I wasn't that 12-year-old girl anymore either. I'd been daydreaming, and what seemed like hours of reminiscing was only actually a matter of minutes. That very poignant story earned me an A star that day, and probably helped me to make some sense of my father's illness and the loss I felt following his absence. It was rather bizarre that such a sad experience became the beginning of my love for writing. Perhaps I even inherited the love of writing from my father, who knows? He always said that one day he would write a book, but sadly that will now never happen. Maybe I'll decide to write one, and if I do, I will certainly dedicate it in loving memory of my father, who was very dear to me.